So, Call of Duty came out last week and it wasn't set in the future, so I decided to check it out. Even though I stopped being a huge fan of the series around 5 years ago, a project I was working on with the Modern Warfare trilogy made me want to play the campaign and pick at it a little bit. I've also played the multiplayer a little, but I've decided that I want to wait until I hit my first prestige or so to talk about it, so I can get enough time into the game to develop an opinion on it. Before I get into this, I want to say that this video is going to contain a lot of spoilers, and it's not formatted with them in mind, so I can't really section them off or anything. You've been warned. The campaign starts out with you, Private Ronald Daniels, along with your squad mates Private Zussman, your best friend and medic, which the game quite obviously points out off the bat.
I hated Zussman the first week of basic, but now he's probably the best friend I have in the world. He's always looking for trouble. If there wasn't already a war on, he'd be off trying to start one.
Besides,
I wonder who's going to be a main source of conflict later. Private Styles, a military photographer, and Private Aleo, an African campaign veteran. Your squad is part of the 1st Infantry Division, which was also in a couple of the previous games, especially in Call of Duty 2, where you play as another guy named Ronald, and was known for being the first ones across the Rhine during the First World War. You're led by Sergeant Pearson, who fits the super hardcore military leader stereotype to a T and lacks any sort of personality. Holding him back is Lieutenant Turner, who is a lot more laid back and practical, and helps your squad out by keeping batshit Pearson from getting you all killed. After a rousing speech by Colonel Davis, your platoon sets off to storm the beaches of Normandy in an introduction that could basically be described as the generic newsreel montage of the World War II genre. I mean, D-Day is technically the very beginning of World War II for the United States, at least in the European theater, but the invasion of Normandy has been done to death by every story set in this time period. Even Call of Duty has done this before in the second game, and kind of again with the same gameplay set on a different beach in World at War. I know D-Day was an important part of World War II, and that it's a good way of showing how bloody the war was, but it doesn't mean that every single World War II story needs to start with it. Plus, if you're going to start with D-Day anyway, at least try to make it somewhat memorable. Finally, your squad makes it across the beach, and you're sent on a mission to take out the artillery that's ruthlessly bombing the Allies. While you're taking out the final encampment, you and Zussman are attacked by a German soldier, and the second most annoying feature of this game is showcased: quick time events. Now, I don't mind a QTE popping up every now and then, but this game has one in almost every mission. I don't really understand why developers keep putting them into their games, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone praise a QTE in any positive way. The most positive review I've heard of them were not as annoying as most games. They're supposed to bridge the gap between movie-like action sequences and the video game medium, but honestly, making every action sequence into a QTE kind of detracts from the experience. Really, they'd be better off as cutscenes are just not existing in the first place. During the struggle, Zussman gets stabbed in the abdomen, which causes you to drag him through the crossfire back to the base camp. I think the way that they handled this section is a lot better than the times you had to drag Soap around in Modern Warfare 3 and Macmillan in Call of Duty 4, and the annoying heroic missions in this game, because it's scripted so that each assault is controlled, which puts you on enough rails that you can get through it without backing yourself into a corner, but free enough it keeps you on your toes. Honestly, it was a lot better than the QTE sequence right before it, even though in both sections your actions are extremely controlled. You eventually get back to the camp, which is overwhelmed with the wounded, and Zussman isn't looking good. He's fading in and out of consciousness, but a medic comes along and takes him over while you go finish the mission. In the end, it turns out he's going to be okay, but needs some time to rest, which he refuses. The way they set up his injury implies that it will have some sort of adverse effect on him down the road, but aside from mentioning it a couple times in the next mission or two, it never really develops into anything. The next mission is Operation Cobra, where you're fighting through France with the goal of taking back Paris. After that is Stronghold, where you battle your way through the French city of Marigny as you try to take it back from the Germans. In one section, you provide sniper support for your squad as they try to fight through the town square, but as the plans start to look like they're going awry, a rocket hits the church and drops on top of you. A couple of lives are indiscriminately lost, but thanks to some plot armor, every main character stays intact. Once the city has been taken over, your squad teams up with the SOE, or British Special Forces, to take out an armored train carrying V2 rockets to Paris, which could have helped tip the real-world Battle of Britain in Germany's favor. You try to sneak up on the station, but once your cover is blown, your squad fights their way through the station in an attempt to stop the train. The train is already moving when you arrive, forcing you to hop into a jeep and try to stop it. Eventually, you stop the train by derailing it and cause it to crash on top of you, knocking you out in the process. You wake up to a French woman telling you that she'll take you back to your squad, and you fight through a crowd of Germans until you regroup with your squad. You come to find out that she's part of La Resistance and happens to have a plan to greatly improve your chances of taking back Paris. Originally, I was going to cover the previous missions in more detail, but after looking back at the campaign as a whole, I've realized that most of these missions show one of the main issues with World War II's story: filler. If you took this entire game and boiled it down so that only the important missions stay, it'd be maybe 5 missions long. It's not exactly that they're boring, but they just lack a purpose. For the majority of this game, there's no specific external conflict outside of just take back Paris and win World War II, and it's weighted in such a way that the first 3/4 of the game accounts for maybe 1/4 of the story's exposition. Most missions can be summed up as you complete a set of random orders and also get an extra 3 minutes of plot development at the end. I think this waiting, misprioritization of plot details that lack a personal connection showcases some seriously weak writing. Also, these missions are where I learned that relying on health packs is a really dumb mechanic, especially with how unforgiving the veteran difficulty is. There are a lot of games out there that do this mechanic right, and they're wonderful games. Skyrim and Half-Life have a health system that requires players to use some sort of healing mechanic in order to regain HP, and they work completely fine. However, the type of system that World War II uses just doesn't really fit the feel of the game. Call of Duty is full of quick engagements where a lot of times you're taking damage from all sides. If you pop your head up, there's a good chance that one of the dozen enemies on screen is going to hit you. While the forgiveness of the easier difficulties likely masks the problem of static health in these situations, Veteran makes it abundantly clear that the system takes difficult gameplay and turns it into grueling gameplay. There's nothing worse than sitting behind a small amount of cover with low health and no first aid kits, knowing that moving from this exact spot is going to completely erase the past 5 minutes of work you just did. Combined with the death screen and loading time between lives, having a system with this brutal of a punishment just kills the flow of the game. Call of Duty keeps a pretty quick tempo, and this system combined with the type of combat in the game just grinds it to a halt. If there was a little bit of regeneration that allowed you enough health to maybe jump to another piece of cover to get into a better position or find another med pack, this would have been great. Also, the fact that the med packs won't heal you to full health without wasting one of them in most cases just kinda sucks. It takes engagements that would normally severely wound you and turns them into you turning a corner and getting one-shotted by a German with a shotgun. By all means, make the game difficult, but don't make it annoying to play. The next mission starts off with something a little bit different from the Call of Duty franchise, a spy scene. You're put into the shoes of Roussel, a female resistance fighter, as you fake your way into a Nazi garrison in order to contact Fisher to receive explosives that you'll use in the attack on Paris. The first section of the mission is pretty simple. You make your way through the German base in order to find Fisher, only talking to and sneaking your way through the security to find him. You don't have to fight or kill anybody until later on in the mission, where you must sneak through a window in Polizeiführer Heinrich's office, being confronted by him. You must attempt to talk your way out of it using travel documents as a cover, but you come to find out that he knows exactly who you are. Okay, why is it that in every movie or game ever, all Nazi officers are brutal but omnipotent beings? It's like every single one of them are modeled after Hans Landa from the Inglourious Bastards. They always start off with some threatening monologue and end with the complete destruction of your plans. There's never an officer that hears your cover story and goes, "Makes sense, carry on." Anyway, you retrieve the explosives from Fisher, but are forced to escape after the base goes on lockdown, following the discovery of Heinrich's body. Before you leave the premises, you must plant explosives on the gates to the garrison, with the option of saving Fisher in preparation for the invasion. For the second part of the mission, you take place of Daniels once again, and you fight to take over the garrison and defend it from waves of enemies trying to take it back. You fend them off, and Paris celebrates its liberation. The next mission is Collateral Damage, taking you to Aachen, Germany, as you try to take the town back from the Germans. It starts off with a pretty bad attempt at character development in the form of a letter from your girlfriend. For some reason, even though it's implied that you send letters back and forth to each other, you think that she's leaving you all of a sudden. However, you refuse to open the letter in case that she is, because you don't want to get demotivated by it during the effort. You fight in the streets for a while, eventually calling for tank support, putting you into the shoes of a Sherman driver, which was pretty fun, except for the fact that the enemy tanks swivel at the exact same speed you circle them, making the point where you fight two tanks at once pretty annoying. Your goal is to take back a hotel controlled by the Germans, and it works pretty well until you discover civilians hiding in the basement. Now you work to get a truck running to take them back to safety after debating with some of the members of the platoon. Once you get everyone on board, you come to find that the younger sister of one of the girls who you found earlier went back into the basement for some reason. How do you forget your younger sister while evacuating a place that's in the middle of a battleground? Even if she just broke free from you, you probably could have maybe pointed it out that she was missing before you all left the basement. Or if she was being difficult about it, you could have had one of the soldiers carry her to the truck. This girl's laziness forces you back into the hotel to find the sister, only to have the hotel immediately swarmed with Germans, causing you to sneak your way out with the girl on hand. I have to say that I kind of enjoyed the sequence, but the circumstances of it are honestly stupid. You make it back to the truck, defend it from the Germans, only for some random to shoot the back of the truck, killing the older daughter of the girl you just rescued.
She's gone.
Jesus Christ. I think even though this mission was pretty dumb at times, except for the tank sequence, I think it does a good job casting a light on the civilian part of the war that's often left ignored by other games. Next up is Death Factory, which puts you deep in the forest as you fight your way to Hill 943. The mission starts off with you finally reading the letter that your girl sent you. She's pregnant, and this wasn't important enough of an event for the plot to focus on for some reason. Your first objective is to defend a bridge from German attack, which was honestly pretty fun. However, after a couple battles, you eventually get separated by your squad because of an artillery barrage, which puts you into the third stealth section in a row. At first I was really glad that they put stealth into this game, as a lot of the previous titles limited it to a short hand-holding section somewhere in the middle of the game, but it got to the point where I think the developers realized that stealth was a thing halfway through development, so they just put it in places where they could have a reason for it. The stealth element went from being a nice break from the norm, but after 3 times in 3 consecutive missions, it got tiring. Eventually, you link back up with Turner and wait for Pearson's squad to meet back up with you. Next, you start the attack on Hill 943. As you're waiting for Pearson to meet up with you, you ask Turner about Pearson's past, as there's rumors that he caused his platoon to get killed during the Battle of Kasserine Pass. Turner kind of dodges the question, and you get a transmission from Baker that Pearson's squad is already assaulting the hill, and you race to get up there in time. You breach the base and work your way through the artillery encampments in order to stop the barrage on your assault when a panzer tank is sent after you. You eventually destroy it by running up behind it and throwing thermite on it. As you're leaving the base, Turner is shot, and he sacrifices himself to save your squad from being killed, repeating the 1st Infantry motto of "No sacrifice too great." This changes the dynamic of the game a little, as the entire platoon is now under Pearson's control. The sergeant that has proven himself to be 1, incapable of decision-making process required to run a platoon, and 2, a raging lunatic. Really, out of all the people that they could have put in his place and they chose Pearson, was there nobody else they could have used? Also, that means you get a promotion to corporal and putting you in control of the squad and directly under Pearson, who lets you know that any disobeying of his orders will be considered dereliction. The next mission takes place on Christmas Day, with your squad mourning the loss of Turner, only to be interrupted by Pearson's drunken tirade against your squad. You order to take a box of ammunition to one of the guards where they spot the Germans closing in on your base. You're forced to call in an airstrike on a broken phone in the middle of the battlefield, because outside of the base is the best place to put something like that. You have to escort a technician to the phone, who's everybody's kind of racist against, so he can fix it and call in an airstrike. In this mission, you get to fly a plane around as you escort a group of bombers into Germany, and then break off to provide air support for the base Daniels is defending. I think they did an alright job with the air mission. I don't think the Call of Duty engine is really built for flying, and the developers really don't know how to design a flying mission, because a lot of the enemy planes were hard to spot on their own, and targeting them was really hard. However, I feel that they acknowledged some of these issues and tried to at least design systems that improved the gameplay. First, you can press a button and the planes will be highlighted for you, which is one of the only ways that you can tell they're enemies. Also, you have the ability to lock on a single jet and the game will chase it for you, and all you have to do is aim and fire, which on one hand made the game a lot easier, but also made it less annoying to get through. Overall, I was really happy to see a little bit of variation in gameplay with this game, because just sticking to ground infantry combat gets boring after a while. The next mission starts off with you processing German soldiers captured from the last mission. Zussman offers one of them water, and Pearson throws a fit that ends with one of the prisoners running away. You track him down and find out that he had information on a shipment of explosives that's going to be used to destroy the last bridge over the Rhine.
Don't Kraut, why'd you run? You must be hiding something.
Because that's the only reason why somebody would run away as they're being captured. You ambush the convoy and take out the explosives, and then head to a German base to find the rest of the shipment. During the attack on the base, Zussman gets captured by the Germans, and you steal your squad's jeep and try to stop the truck, only for you to crash into it and for the Germans to eventually take Zussman away.
Ah! I forgot! I don't know how to drive! Hey! Wonder what this pedal's for!
You get knocked out and wake up with Pearson somehow standing over you, even though you just drove a mile or 2 down the road, and they were caught up in a fight when you left. Pearson attempts to kill you, but the rest of your squad shows up before he can pull the trigger. The squad takes you back to the camp and tends to your wounds. You wake up again in the infirmary, and Daniels comes in to tell you that you've been honorably discharged because the information that you randomly found on an escaping prisoner accelerated the war effort. He also tells you that Pearson didn't actually lead his men to death, but ended up losing people trying to save the men trapped in Kasserine Pass.
Kasserine? You got it all wrong, Private. Pearson was ordered to retreat, but some of his men were trapped in the pass. Couldn't bring himself to fall back without them. But he ended up just losing more trying to save them. It's never been the same.
You then have a vision of returning home to your brother and girlfriend and being bothered that you didn't find Zussman. The Rhine begins with you in Pearson's tent trying to get you back into the platoon. You tell him that Kasserine Pass wasn't his fault, and he gets angry at you and fights you. He tells you that you've never seen sacrifice, and then you rip up your ticket home in front of him to show how bad you want to find Zussman, and he lets you back in. You head off to Remagen, Germany to take over the last bridge over the Rhine before it gets destroyed. After you take over the first towers, you push across the bridge as they try to blow it up, and then you take out the second towers and anti-aircraft, pushing the Germans back into the tunnel. Davis tells the platoon to wait for sweeping the local camps, but your squad goes along anyway.
Davis has ordered us to wait for authorization before conducting a sweep. But I guess you know what to do with Davis's orders.
Copy that, Sergeant.
All right.
The final mission takes you to a concentration camp in Berga, Germany. It's the last camp your squad has found, and you still haven't found Zussman yet. Stiles goes through and takes pictures of what's left of the horrors that took place there, as most of it has been destroyed before you got there. You walk around a little bit and notice that the camp has only recently been abandoned, and there's clues to where they've been marching the prisoners. You run into the forest to find Zussman, and the game cuts to a flashback of you and your brother. Turns out the reason why you feel so guilty is because your brother never made it out of the woods with you. You come across some Nazis that's trying to execute Zussman, and this time you take the shot, killing them and saving Zussman. You go home and the game ends. Call of Duty World War II was probably the weakest game that I've played in the series. The core problem with it is that the vast majority of the game is completely forgettable. I've recently played through the Modern Warfare trilogy and it felt like a quick refresh to me. What made most of those games so enjoyable is that they had characters, settings, and sequences within them that stick out in your mind years after you've played them. I could describe to you the plot of Modern Warfare 2 5 years after playing it better than I could World War II 6 months from now because there's so little substance in this game. The problem with World War II's story is, well, the entire story. The game's central conflict for 3/4 of the game is beat the Nazis, which for a game that is historical fiction and not an alternate history is extremely lazy. Really, at any point did you think we were going to lose? This game basically explains the characters in the first few minutes of the game, develops some of the characters ever so slightly, and then just scene hops for about 9 missions. There's no meaningful character development, no clear conflict, and no reason for most of these missions to exist. Then it feels like 3/4 of the way through development, they needed something, anything, to draw people's attention to the game, so they tacked on the last 3 missions at the last minute to justify the game's existence. Honestly, Zussman being captured was the only interesting part of the game, but they put so much effort into literally everything else to the point that it was annoying. The flashbacks to your brother being attacked by wolves only had a minor effect on the story, but they put so much emphasis on it that it looked like it was going to be a major part of the game, only for it to culminate into one small event at the very end of the game. Then they had Pearson's backstory in the center of the game for some reason, even though it didn't really end up developing into anything. Yes, he's an ass, we get it. Oh, actually he isn't that bad. Okay, what does this really have to do with anything, except for giving you a small part of your rhetoric when you ask Pearson to let you back into the platoon? Really, you could have went in, argued, ripped up your paper, and still probably left with the same result. Yes, his backstory is part of his character, but still not really important enough to spend an inordinate amount of time on. Really, most of the game should have been cut out, with Zussman's character being developed and being captured early on, and a second half that mostly dealt with finding him. They said they spent a lot of time looking for them, and somehow they got information of where he was placed, but they brushed over it to get to the conclusion. It would have been a lot more interesting to see them sweep through and liberate the camps and fight some minor villains to find Zussman instead of wandering around Europe fighting random battles against the Germans for half of the game. The game story lacks a clear direction and becomes tiring to play after an hour or so. I'm willing to look over minor annoyances if I feel the setbacks lead to an enticing goal, but with this game it just feels like you're fighting for nothing. Also, the gameplay was pretty bland. As I said before, the medpack system breaks the tempo that Call of Duty games run at and makes the game flow less smoothly, plus the way they heal on veteran takes the game from being challenged to being annoying to play. Also, the QuickTime events were total trash. I don't know why developers keep putting them in the games, even though most of them could be either replaced with a normal cutscene or just removed completely to make a better sequence. There are more creative ways of building excitement and urgency without forcing players to mash a button. The vehicle sections were pretty cool and some of the stealth missions were cool before they got repetitive, but the gameplay overall is just really a huge step back from the series. Overall, the campaign for Call of Duty World War II was pretty weak. There's really no outstanding characters, features, or storylines to draw people in and keep them playing, and I wouldn't doubt that a lot of people quit early on. If this game removed all of its boring or repetitive parts and everything that doesn't affect the story at all, it'd be under an hour long. The story is written more as a synopsis than it is a fully fleshed out piece. World War II lacks any sort of depth or redeeming qualities, and honestly, I'll probably forget most of what happened within the next month. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of this kind of content, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm doing something similar but a lot larger on the Modern Warfare trilogy, which will be out within probably the next month. If you have any suggestions for videos like this, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Peace.